Hello ARMY, welcome back to my channel, VKBTS. OMG, did that just happen on stage? And did we all miss what it really meant? One hand reached out just for a second. No dramatic music change, no spotlight shift, just Taehyung's hand moving toward Jungkook. But what happened next? That's where everything changed. Jungkook paused. Not long, but long enough. His expression shifted. His eyes said something words couldn't explain, and suddenly the entire comeback didn't feel the same anymore. Was that hesitation real? And then, just when fans were trying to understand that moment, those 5 words dropped like a shockwave. Thank you and I'm sorry. Sorry for what? Sorry to whom? Because that didn't sound like a normal comeback message. It sounded personal, emotional, almost like a confession hidden in plain sight. Now ARMY is asking, was that just a performance, or did Taekook just reveal something they were never supposed to show? Watch closely because this moment might explain everything. The cameras didn't shake. The stage lights didn't flicker. Nothing dramatic happened, at least not in the way the world usually defines drama. And yet in that quiet, almost fragile moment, something shifted. Something undeniable. Something no statement, no press release, no carefully managed comeback narrative could ever fully control again. Because it wasn't the performance that shook the internet. It was the hands, Jungkook's reaction, and the silence that followed. For those watching closely, the moment didn't feel rehearsed. It didn't feel like part of a global comeback strategy. It felt real, too real. The kind of real that slips through even the tightest industry control. The kind of real that leaves behind questions instead of answers. The kind that makes fans stop, rewind, and ask, what did we just witness? This is where the story begins. Not with music, not with choreography, but with a glance, a hand, and a reaction that may have revealed more than intended. The comeback stage was already carrying pressure before it even began. After months of speculation, silence, and emotional distance that fans had been dissecting piece by piece, BTS returned under a spotlight heavier than ever. Every move mattered. Every expression was analyzed. Every second was watched, not just by fans, but by a global audience searching for clues. Because this wasn't just a comeback. This was a test of unity, a test of truth, a test of whether everything fans believed about Taehyung and Jungkook, about Taekook, was still standing or quietly breaking. And then it happened. Taehyung reached out. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't exaggerated. It was subtle. Almost too subtle for casual viewers to even notice. But for those who have followed them closely, who understand their unspoken language, that moment felt louder than any performance that night. His hand moved toward Jungkook, and for a split second, time seemed to pause. Because Jungkook didn't react immediately. There was a delay, a hesitation, a flicker of something in his eyes that cameras caught but couldn't explain. Was it shock? Was it emotion? Or was it something far more complicated? Something that had been building behind the scenes for months? And then came the reaction. Jungkook looked at Taehyung not as a performer, not as a bandmate following choreography, but as someone caught between instinct and awareness. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly, but enough to send shockwaves through ARMY across the world. Because in that look, fans didn't just see a response. They saw a story. A story no one had officially told. A story that didn't match the polished image of a perfect comeback. And suddenly, everything felt different. The performance continued. The music played. The crowd cheered. But for those who noticed, the focus had already changed. It was no longer about the stage. It was about what just happened on it. Then, as if the moment needed confirmation, the words came. Thank you and I'm sorry. 5 simple words. But in the context of everything that had been building, every rumor, every theory, every unexplained distance, they didn't feel simple at all. Who was the apology for? The fans? Each other? Or something that hasn't been revealed yet? The ambiguity only deepened the mystery. Because in the world of K-pop, especially at this level, words are rarely accidental. Statements are crafted. Messages are controlled. Every phrase is designed to carry a specific meaning. But this didn't feel controlled. This felt like something slipping through, something real. And that's exactly why it hit so hard. Fans immediately began connecting the dots. The emotional distance seen in previous appearances, The lack of interaction that once defined their dynamic, the subtle changes in body language, the unanswered questions surrounding recent interviews and live broadcasts. Was this moment the confirmation they had been waiting for, or something even more complicated? Because if everything was fine, why did that moment feel so heavy? Why did Jungkook hesitate? Why did Taehyung's gesture feel almost uncertain? And most importantly, why did those 5 words sound less like gratitude and more like a confession? As clips of the moment spread across social media, the reaction was immediate and intense. Millions of views, endless comments, fans analyzing every frame, every micro-expression, every second of silence. Some called it emotional, others called it heartbreaking, and many began asking a question no official source has answered yet. Was this comeback hiding something? Because for a group known for their unbreakable bond, this moment didn't feel like reassurance. It felt like tension, not loud, not explosive, but quiet, lingering, and impossible to ignore. And that's what made it even more powerful. Because sometimes, the loudest truths are the ones that aren't spoken. The ones that appear in hesitation, in glances, in the space between two people who once seemed inseparable. As the performance ended and the members stood together, smiling for the cameras, the contrast became even more striking. On the surface, everything looked perfect, the image fans had been waiting for. But underneath, something felt unresolved. And ARMY noticed. They always do. Because this fandom doesn't just watch, they feel. And what they felt in that moment wasn't just excitement for a comeback. It was confusion. It was concern. It was the unmistakable sense that something important had just been revealed, but not fully explained. Now the question remains. What really happened in that moment? Was it simply an emotional interaction blown out of proportion by fans eager for meaning? Or was it a glimpse into something deeper? A reality that has been carefully kept out of the spotlight until now? And if it was real, if that hesitation, that reaction, that apology meant something more, then what comes next? Because comebacks are supposed to bring clarity, celebration, unity. But this one brought questions. The more people watched that moment again, the more those questions refused to disappear. Was Jungkook's reaction just instinct? Or was it the first honest response we've seen in a long time? Was Taehyung reaching out as part of a performance? Or was it something he needed to do regardless of the cameras? And those words, "Thank you and I'm sorry," were they meant for the world, or just for one person standing beside him? Until those answers come, one thing is certain. That moment changed everything. Not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. And in a world built on perfect images and controlled narratives, sometimes all it takes is one unscripted second to reveal the truth everyone was trying not to see. The stage lights dimmed slightly as the music transitioned, but the atmosphere didn't settle. It tightened. The kind of tension that doesn't scream, but lingers in the air, pressing quietly against every second that followed. For viewers who had already caught that fleeting hand moment, nothing felt the same anymore. Every movement that came after seemed heavier, more deliberate, or perhaps more revealing. Because once you see something, you can't unsee it. The entire narrative begins to shift. Jungkook tried to recover, or at least that's what it looked like. His posture straightened, his expression reset into the familiar calm professionalism fans have admired for years. But something was off. Subtle, almost invisible unless you were searching for it. His smile didn't fully reach his eyes. His timing, usually flawless, felt just a fraction delayed. Meanwhile, Taehyung didn't look back, and that somehow spoke even louder. Because if that gesture had meant nothing, why not acknowledge it? Why not glance back, even briefly, to confirm the connection? Instead, he moved forward, focused, controlled, almost distant. And suddenly, fans began noticing something that hadn't been obvious before. They were performing on the same stage, but were they really together? And that's where the speculation deepened. As clips from different angles continued to surface online, each one seemed to add another layer to the mystery. Slowed-down videos, zoomed-in frames, and side-by-side comparisons with past performances revealed subtle differences that were hard to ignore. There was a time when their interactions felt effortless, almost instinctive, glances, smiles, and small gestures that didn't need explanation. But now something felt slightly out of sync. Not completely broken, not obvious to everyone, but noticeable enough for those who had followed them closely for years. What made it even more intense was the silence that followed. No clarification, no acknowledgement, no attempt to address what fans had clearly seen. In an industry where every detail is usually controlled and managed, this absence of explanation felt unusual. It left space for interpretation, for questions to grow, and for emotions to deepen. Because sometimes, what isn't said can carry more weight than anything that is openly explained. Fans began revisiting older moments, comparing interactions, searching for patterns that might explain what they had just witnessed. Small details that once seemed insignificant suddenly felt meaningful. The way they stood next to each other, the frequency of their eye contact, even the tone of their voices in interviews. Everything became part of a bigger picture that fans were trying to understand piece by piece. And yet, despite all the speculation, one thing remained clear. The connection between them still existed. It hadn't disappeared. It hadn't been erased. It was still there, just different, quieter, more complex, perhaps even more real than before. Because real connections aren't always perfect or easy to understand. Sometimes, they carry emotions that don't translate neatly on stage or through a screen. Maybe that's why this moment resonated so deeply. Not because it gave answers, but because it felt honest. It reminded everyone that behind the performances, the choreography, and the global spotlight, there are real emotions, real people, and real stories that don't always follow a script. And sometimes, it's those unscripted moments, the ones filled with hesitation, silence, and unspoken meaning, that stay with us the longest.